Hey guys, this is the Swamp Cleaner back with another video for you. Now, if you've noticed the title, this is actually not going to be about politics. Heaven forbid, thank God. Finally, I'm going to do something that is not politics. And yes, I noticed because this impeachment stuff is a quagmire. Apparently, whistleblowers are actually recanting or changing up what they actually thought they said or heard. You have witnesses, key witnesses, perjuring themselves, so this is all turning into a giant farce. So I'm actually going to do a movie review. This is actually the first movie review on this channel, and it's actually a movie that I came right in the door from watching not just 30 minutes ago. So this is going to be fresh and a fresh hot take for you on the movie Midway. It just came out. It stars the likes of Patrick Wilson, Ed Skrein, Luke Evans, Nick Jonas is in here. You got big hitters like Woody Harrelson and Dennis Quaid. And I have to say, my first impressions of it, it's a very well done movie. Now, I was just taking a look at the Rotten Tomatoes. The fan score is, I think, at 91%, and critic scores are 41%, so they're rotten. And you'll see why, because they're just eye-rollingly cringe-worthy because of course we know the critical people, the the hoity-toity Hollywood high-up people are disconnected because they're living in their own bubbles, and they don't understand a good movie when they see it. So we'll get into some of those comments as well, but in my opinion, this is a very good movie. It was produced and directed by Roland Emmerich. He's done the likes of Independence Day, Day After Tomorrow, etc., etc. A lot of action movies or disaster movies, and in this movie, and he likes to use a lot of CGI. In this movie, there is a lot of CGI. I'm going to get the negative out of the way first, and then I'm going to focus on the positives because that's what I want to hone in on afterwards when I'm going to dissect people's critiques of it. Now, there is a ton of CGI. A lot of this is green screen. A lot of the people in the background is green screen. This is a very CGI heavy movie. But even though the CGI is noticeable and in some cases questionable, the way they have done it, polished it up, and gave it a glossy feel, gives you that whole old timey, fashioned feeling that you're like looking at it, in that sense. It's like an old fashioned feel, and that's where I think the CGI is okay. This is for the movie. The CGI is done right because you can't get planes like vintage airplanes or vintage era battleships or destroyers or heaven forbid the carriers to be out there again. So you have to CGI it. But the way it was done was good enough for this movie, and a lot of people are going to be shitting on the CGI in the critiques. But beyond that, the way I think, in my opinion, how they made it that glossy touch, tiny bit of glare because yeah, you're in the ocean. Like you can see the screenshot here, and I'll show some of this trailer, and I'm going to spoil some points of the movie to give you context and the context is to explain how this movie was historically accurate, even though some of the characters are undoubtedly overacted, but that's not the point. I mean, and some people want to try to say Pearl Harbor from 2001 is a better movie than this, and I'm I'm gonna have to destroy that in just one line, but I'll keep that for a little bit later. First off, the CGI, yes, some of it is, sure, could be better. Seems like it's a cutting from a high end video game, but it doesn't detract from the whole esoteric feeling of the movie. So, for the CGI, I give it a 6 out of 10. Just not a 5 out of 10, a 6 out of 10, just because of how they finished it and glossed it up. But let's like go through this trailer a little bit and I'll start like picking up on some of the people and like start popping off some of the ideas that I have in my head here. But let's just watch this trailer. Like here's, you can see the CGI. There's a lot.
Where's this kid? He didn't think he could cut it. I figured it was just the usual jitters. I take him under my wing.
Oh, and Mandy Moore does a very, very good job in this movie too. I'll touch on that as well. And oh, you know what? Pause for 1 second. This actor right here, this is Alexander Ludwig. If anybody has seen the show Vikings on Vikings on History Channel, this is Bjorn Ironside. So there's a little key to him. There's a little nod to him. I find that he's a very good actor, and he did, for his tiny role in this movie, he did a decent job. He did a very good job. So good on him.
He was right to be scared.
This is Edward Fry. He does a very good job. He does that Jersey thing. He does an okay job, even though he's a British actor. He does
Pearl
an okay
Harbor
job.
is the greatest intelligence failure in American history.
Oh yes, that was Patrick Wilson. He plays the Intel commanding officer, Leighton, and with him, spoiler here, in the movie, they actually start in a quick prologue in 1937 in Tokyo, where there's a naval meeting between the Japanese and other foreign naval powers, including the United States and Britain, etc., and they're all having a meeting of how to keep the peace on the waters and make everything together. But there's a little aside where Leighton here actually talks to Admiral Yamamoto, and Yamamoto is just saying, like, don't press us by cutting off the oil because we don't want to make, we don't want to make anything bad happen. The Americans are like, oh yes, and he's just like, yeah, nobody wants war, but they both have an understanding that something is coming, and it's coming soon, because the Japanese are very aggressive.
This can never happen again. I want to make it right.
Woody Harrelson plays Admiral Nimitz. He does a very good job at this. Woody Harrelson isn't, the normal Woody Harrelson. He's very reserved in this. He does a very good job, and there is a little bit of comedy. Just like a Roland Emmerich movie, there is a little bit of comedy because he meets with, another spoiler, the intelligence officer, Patrick Wilson's number 2 man, who's like the brains of it all. He's cracking the Japanese code, and he's like just down there all the time, just in a robe and in slippers, and he's just like, well, if you want me to believe a bunch of guys who pretty much don't get any sunlight and like a guy who's wearing fuzzy slippers, like, it could be worse. But that was hilarious. But he does a good job at this. And Dennis Quaid also does a very good job at this. He plays Bull Halsey, and I'll talk a little bit more about the more intricacies that make it more an accurate movie than a more Hollywood glorified movie. Even though there is a tiny bit of glorification and over dramatization at like a point or two.
Some of the boys still want to fight.
Oh, Nick Jonas. Oh, Nick Jonas. His character is very good, but he gets done dirty in this movie. Oh man, he gets done dirty. I don't know if I want to tell you guys or not, but I guess I will in a little bit. But that's a big spoiler. But he gets done dirty by the Japanese, and this is all real.
The Japanese
too.
are planning
This is all
something
true
bigger.
story.
So what's the target? We believe it's Midway.
Washington disagrees.
Washington is wrong.
If we lose, the Japanese own the West Coast. Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Will burn.
And that is very historically accurate. I'm going to talk about the historical accuracies a little bit here now. Because the Japanese did the lightning strikes on Pearl Harbor, and it wasn't just the only attack. A lot of people, I think, gloss over this part of history, and only a few people pay attention. It's not just Pearl Harbor that was attacked, but the Japanese simultaneously attacked across all of the South Pacific, including Malaysia, Burma, the Philippines. They are moving towards to attack Wake Island in maybe the next day or two, or in the next week or two. A lot of strategic areas were hit, and after that, the Japanese were just kept on rolling through, taking island after island, territory after territory, and the Americans were desperate. They were scared because who knows how strong the Japanese are and how far they could go. They could actually attack the mainland. They could attack the West Coast, and cities could be occupied by the Japanese. That was a real concern to the Americans, and that's which was very accurate. And I liked how he conveyed that message to his wife. And another historical accuracy is what they actually touched on. And I was thinking, are they actually going to talk about this? Because it's dealt with the code breakers. Another spoiler here. It's not really a spoiler because it's historically accurate. They knew that the Japanese were targeting areas in the Pacific, and they knew because they cracked some of the code what the code words were for the locations. So one code word was AF. They knew AF stood for a location, but they didn't know where. So in the movie they actually brought it up where Midway transmitted an unencrypted message, so it was just in plain language that the enemy could pick up and read just right off the prompter, saying that they were running short on water. But that was actually a ruse. They were actually the intelligence, and this is me telling you the actual history, deep history, is that his intelligence office spread and sent messages to the different targets, per se, because they didn't know which, to say that they were short on various supplies and send those things in plain script. And the Japanese would pick it up, and then they would say, hey, our target here is short on this, short on that. And Midway, since they said they were short on water, the Japanese relayed that message saying, hey, Midway is short on water. That confirmed that their target, which, because AF was being talked about a lot, that confirmed to the Americans that Midway was the target for the big attack by the Japanese. So that was another historical nugget that I liked in the movie. But what another good thing is about the movie is that it's not just about Midway. It's about Pearl Harbor, well, the events leading up to Midway. So it includes Pearl Harbor, the Americans' response, such as the attacks on Marshall Islands, which did okay, but it wasn't big enough. And Mr. Best here, who's played by Ed Skrein, he was doing a good job, and he was trying to motivate the men who were pretty much downtrodden. And this is all true and relevant. And Luke Evans also plays McCluskey, who is the opposite to Skrein. He's the other wing commander. And at first they're butting heads, but then they come together because the bigger fight is with the Japanese. And then they actually talk about the Coral Sea, where they actually lose the Lexington and the Yorktown is severely damaged. And they don't actually talk about it in the movie. They do touch on it that it is the lifeline between Australia and America, but strategically, it's a win for the Allied forces because it halts the Japanese advance towards the rest of those islands north of Australia in Papua New Guinea and New Britain, etc. And there was a lot of fighting that occurred on those islands for the next year or two, which I'm not going to talk about. But they also do the Doolittle Raid, which happened on April 18th, 1942. Doolittle and his group of 16 B-25s flew off of U.S. carriers in heavy seas right off the Japanese coast, bombed Tokyo and tried to make it to free China, so where they can link up with the Chinese and then get back to Allied lines. A lot of them had to ditch in the ocean because they were spotted too far out. A lot of them died. A lot of them were captured and tortured by the Japanese. And any China national who helped the Allies escape, including Colonel Doolittle, the Japanese tortured and killed 250,000 of them. And that's historically accurate. And at the end of the movie, they actually give you like little snippets of the main characters, or I mean, not main characters, but the main people and what they did afterwards. And I thought that was a good touch. Um, Dennis Quaid played Admiral Halsey. He did a very good job. He did that rough character, and he actually portrayed what actually happened to him. He got sick. He was sick during Midway, and he actually had shingles. Of all things, the guy had shingles. That sucks. I heard shingles is actually very painful rash, and he had it on his neck and shoulder areas, so that sucked really bad. But overall, the movie did a very good job at tracking the events and the code breakers, understanding the nuance and the importance and what the Japanese, and they actually showed the Japanese side too very well. They portrayed the Japanese very well. The struggles between Yamamoto and Nagumo about how the battle plan should be implemented and what strategy should be followed. And they actually did not it was historically accurate. They did not allow for any fluidity to the battle plan. They kept to a rigid assumption that the Americans were going to be where they thought they were going to be, and they did not assume any other options, and they did not even think that the Americans could break their codes to the extent that they did, and to set a trap for them. But the Japanese fell into that trap, and this is where the battle sequences in this movie really shine, because it's not over glorified, but the CGI with the shininess and the polishness to it is really still intense. So it's like that. It's not real because it does look fake, but it's not, boom, explosion here and you can survive it. No, people are getting shot, people are getting burned. Like, it's real in how the action is depicted, but the CGI, gives it that polished, old-fashioned look. So that's where I think the movie's trying to do two things, but it's only really good at one thing. It's trying to be an action flick because it's Roland Emmerich doing it, but because it's a tribute to the veterans and because they did a good job with it historically accurate, it's real. It's in the historical accurate sense, but they try to make it into an action flick. So there's a little mashing there, and I feel like the whole action flick part could have been let go of to the extent with how they did the CGI, but still it's done where it's historically accurate. The main character, Dick Best, well, not character, the real person's name is Dick Best, played by Ed Skrein. He actually bombed 2 Japanese carriers on one day. So of course they're going to have that in the movie because they need that action. So that's the main character. He's going to bomb not one carrier, but boom, bomb 2 carriers, bang, boom, explosions, planes flying everywhere, and pull up last minute, intense, gets you going, puts you right in that seat, tries to give you that action, but it's more, it could have been, could have been a little bit more muted, and it would have been actually a bit better, in my opinion. So the Hollywood of the Hollywood overdoing is a tiny bit on display, especially in the last bombing. He's coming down, spoiler here, and he's waiting. Oh, and it's like it's almost like it's like slow motion, but not really. Wait, wait, wait! Last second, 1,000 feet. Let's go of the bomb. It's like, and it's just like he's right over the carrier. He's flying over. He's like, "This is for Pearl Harbor." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Drops it, lands right in the deck. It explodes. And he flies through the flames. I'm like, "Oh, okay." See, like that's the whole action thing. That pulls you out a little bit. So that's the major gripe, because that CGI esque overdoing of the Roland Emmerich actiony thing. But what pulls this movie through is how historically accurate it actually is. And you know what? I'm gonna just tell you what happens to Nick Jonas. He gets done dirty. He's flying into plane. He's in the back tail gunner shooting down planes. They get shot down, and they're landed, and they're in a life boat, a little inflatable lifeboat, and they get picked up by a Japanese destroyer, and they get interrogated quickly, and Nick Jonas is like, "Cigarette, please." So they give him a cigarette and let's smoke it for a little bit. He's just like, "You're gonna tell us what the name of your ship is and where it's at." And he's just like, "You know what? Go F yourselves." He's smoking. So you know what? They push, and he says, "If you don't, we're gonna push you overboard." So he's like, "Go F yourselves." So they push him overboard, and they have him tied up to an anchor. So they push the anchor over too, and he gets dragged to the bottom. And that's, ooh, yeah, they did that, and that's historically accurate too. That actually happened to the guy. So I mean, the way they did it in the movie is a little quick, and you don't get the full scope of the actual ramification of what's happening there. So I mean, they blow right over that. So that's another little bit of a gripe. But this movie actually did this movie did a very good job at representing what actually happened, and you can see where Hollywood tried to get in on it. Yes, I know I'm like not really doing the trailer here, but oh yeah, here's the Doolittle, played by Aaron Eckhart, Colonel Doolittle, very good actor. He actually has some interaction with spoiler here, a Chinese local who helps him get out, gives him his lighter, but then that lighter is used as evidence by the Japanese to slaughter that guy's entire village. I mean, it's very sad. And that's true. And that stuff happened. That stuff happened. So, I mean, this movie was very good. And now we'll get to the detractors. We'll get to the movie reviewers of this movie. The critical scores, the ones who know best, the ones who have their pulse on the culture and understand what we all want. So let's go rip them apart. One here, first one I want to get to is by this woman here. She's Amy Nicholson, top critic. She gives it a rotten score. It's hard to imagine. If you're already seeing a film like Pearl Harbor, why would you need to see Midway? Blah. Okay, first off, let me tell you this. This movie, yes, it does have, and like I said before, Mandy Moore does a very good job as Ed Skrein's wife. She does a very good job at supporting her husband, loving him, and understanding that he needs to do a job. And she plays the classical wife of that era. She's dressed up very nice. She's very arid, the hair, the makeup, and there's nothing, there's no feminist thing or no message about that. And I'm just like, maybe, and I don't want to get into feminism, but maybe this is why this is this woman's main gripe, because she brings up Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is a love story with a war movie sugar-coated in there. I'm not here to watch The Young and the Restless military edition. I'm not here to watch The Love Triangle of Oahu. Okay? I'm here to watch a war movie, and that's it. And this is what this movie did. It actually gives you a true bearing on the intricacies of what's happening on the battlefront and at home. Because a lot of these guys during those early months of the war, they were able to go back and forth from those islands on Pearl Harbor and Midway and stuff, and they could actually get off the boat, see their wives for a couple of days before they had to ship back out to fight the Japanese again before the main battle. So he could actually keep his wife updated, and and because these guys were consulted, all these guys who were still alive were all consulted about this. So I mean, this was all based off of first-hand accounts, first-hand knowledge. So I mean, when these people are like, "Well, why do you need to? You should just watch Pearl Harbor." I'm going, okay, a fictitious love story that is got a true event that is surrounded by it. And like, no. I want to make like the actual events, the key historical battles are the main focus, and the progression through from one point to the next, with the 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 connection of a relationship that is real. And of course, Patrick Wilson's character's relationship with his wife is also it's complicated, but then there's an understanding, because another spoiler, his wife is very concerned. He's working a lot. He's working too much. And then she tries to make a stand and hold his glasses hostage. And then he levels with her, hey, and this is at the Doolittle Raid. They had to start early. A lot of them, they had to bomb Tokyo. They're probably going to ditch in the sea. Who knows, if they get captured by the Japanese, they'll be tortured and executed. And if, like, I don't work harder, more of these things will happen. So I think that's all she wanted. She just wanted the truth and understand how bad things are. So she gives him back his glasses and says, I'm going to get you a sandwich. There you go. She literally says, she gives him back his glasses and says, let me fix you up a sandwich. Thank you, honey. Thank you. That's what, like, that's the reality of it. And that's why this movie was so good about the intricacies. But this is why the critics will give it a negative rotten score. But let's move on to, that was my biggest gripe, was from this woman. But there's some other rotten things like Midway, Roland Emmerich's clunky and loud remake makes Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor look like a Best Picture winner. No, there is no love story in this movie here. Every tired war movie cliche is unearthed in a film that brings nothing new, but will no doubt please fans of men in uniform yelling at explosions. So it's like, oh, the dumb man, I like explosions. But here's the thing: what new can you bring to history? History can only be told. You can't remake it so many ways and in so many, like, then you're just rewriting history. You can only tell history from one side's perspective and then the other side's perspective. That's why back in the day, when you had movies like Midway from the 60s, you also had movies like Tora Tora Tora, which was the equivalent, but which emphasized on the Japanese side of it all. So, I mean, unless we make a Tora Tora Tora, a new Tora Tora Tora, then let's try that. Okay? So, I mean, let's go on. More Atari than Kamikaze. Midway looks all the world like a relic of a video game, best left accumulated dust on a shelf. Yes, there's a gripe about the CGI, but yeah, the CGI might be high-end video game CGI, but it's got that polished glossiness that gives you that old-fashioned feel to it. While the tense aerial dogfights and bombing raids look superb, the screenplay is filled with superficial characters uttering conventional cliches. Well, at the time, they weren't cliches because they weren't said before. I mean, and remember, they're playing. There was actual real desperation at the time. They didn't know what they were dealing with the Japanese. They thought that the Japanese could attack the mainland. And I think this is a main gripe about Scrine playing a guy who's from Jersey and maybe overplaying that character slightly, but whatever. Shallow characters don't warrant much emotional investment, especially when spouting such derivative dialogue, but at least they have an uncanny ability to avoid enemy fire. Well, a lot of them, if you can see, a lot of those planes, if you watch the movie, were blowing up and dying, but it's a representation of what happened in reality. The main guys that you're seeing lived through that, flew through that, dropped their bombs, blew stuff up, because Best in real life blew up 2 carriers. He's accredited with it. I mean, what more can you want? So, I mean, these are the critic reviews. There's 5 more pages of it. I looked through some of it. It's just the same old gripes about the CGI and then the cliched characters. It's because they don't understand that they're trying to avoid all the historical accuracy because they probably never actually read up on this stuff in history class, and just want to complain about the CGI and the laughable portrayals of the people. So these critical scores are just as shallow as all these people, and that's why you have audience scores giving it like thumbs up. Who's on par with Saving Private Ryan? But CG, except for the CGI. If you're as huge of a history fan as I am, you should definitely see this movie. From the first carrier introduction, I was hooked right to the fight scenes, kept on the edge. There's no point in the movie I thought, come on, let's get it on to the good stuff. Because why not? Because it was historically accurate. It was important. Just like the point in the lull between the battles where just like they're trying to figure out what the Japanese are doing, and they drop in that little nugget of AF is short on water, so it is it's the target. Midway's AF. So yeah, that's why it's a good movie, and that's why the historical accuracy is going to pull this movie through and make it a very good movie. It's yes, the CGI does it a positive is a double-edged sword. It gives it a positive and negative because it's the CGI is CGI heavy movie, and it could be a bit better in quality, but the glossiness and the old-fashioned polishy feel gives it a bit more immersion. So in the end, I'm gonna wrap this up here. This movie review, but in the end, it's very well done. The actors Ed Skrein here, Dennis Quaid, Woody Harrelson, they all do a very good job at this movie. Even the Japanese actors, they portrayed the real life guys very well. The struggle between the hierarchy of the Japanese Navy and how there was a lot of infighting and they couldn't agree on things, and that was their eventual downfall in the battle. And all in all, very well done movie. If I would give it a rating, I'd say I'd give it a 7.5, 8 out of 10. Seems like a pretty fair rating. But anyway, that was different. Didn't want to do any politics because, of course, again, impeachment is a quagmire. Who cares? Right now, yawn yawn. But I thought, you know what, Midway, I was hyped up for this. I just got back from seeing it. First impressions, hot takes, spoilers. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And this is a Swamp Cleaner. Again, links in the descriptions to my social medias. Give me a follow, give me a like, and I'll catch you guys later. You have a good one.